I don't want to define border, I don't want to define population, but river runs through the land, let's say the land, and then the school is like innovative and like the architecture is not your typical really boring building, and the library is an open library, so people can just come and get books whenever they want. And with books, it's based on an honor system, so you don't have to like give back books if you want, and there's no cost for taking a book. There's an open theater. People can do all sorts of events like dance, music, and there's an open market where people sell fresh produce or like handmade stuff, and next to that is cafe and tea house, so that like people can enjoy their time and like bring brunch or do picnic. And there's gonna be a public space where anybody can book and talk about any issue whatsoever, just to like encourage civic engagement. And then there's a scientific research association and ethics department that kind of make sure there's progress that are based on the ethical lines and residential area. And there's like kind of a rule that like for 1 square meter of like land that you use for human purposes, you need to make it up like by doing something good, like environmental friendly. You would either try and, let's say, like save a captured animal, or you would do some kind of volunteer work that involve like planting trees or maintain national parks. So just basically for land use, you would need to compensate it with environmental friendly activities.
Bhutan has in their constitution that at least 70% of their nation has to be forestry. And they're one of the few places where they have, not only do they have several forests, but they all interconnect. So their entire like just wild biosphere can like animals can freely move across the entire nation of Bhutan by going from forest to forest.
I wasn't really thinking about like setting up a percentage of uncharted land, for example. I'm just more thinking, if this place has to expand, sure, like human societies in general expands, but just like however much you push your border or push the boundary of the land, you would also have to like do something environmental friendly about it. Like if we're gonna leave a footprint somewhere outside this community, then we will also need to plant like a flower right next to you. Last time I had those 10 principles, and like they would be followed, and like at school basically the like everybody, school is mandatory from just basically K to 12 is mandatory, and at the school they will read all sorts of books of like different opinions, even conflicting ones, but in general, like the hope is that they would develop an understanding of what the 10 principles mean. Since the assumption is that everybody goes through the mandatory education and at least have a basic understanding of the 10 principles, so they would elect it based on what they think, like who manifested those the understandings most.
And what if people don't agree? What if they don't think that the 10 principles are good?
That's okay, just discuss, but in general, like these 10 principles, they can be served as like a constitutional guideline or whatever. They can be amended for sure, but everybody still has to agree on it, and then like the kind of the criteria is still about like benefiting society at large and benefiting people living in it and benefiting the environment.
The state of my country is highly digitalized, which means historically governments have been forcing people to live in cities, forcing people to live in established communities, because that's how they could check up on them, that's how they could build schools, that's how they could do a lot of good things, but also a lot of control. And so I think the state has really embraced the fact that you can give communities a lot more freedom in terms of how big and how small they are. You can have a very small communities, and through digitalization. So what does it even mean? I think it's something clear things like you don't really need a mail address because you can get everything digitally. I think this is, I don't know how direct democracy this is because it's a small country, but not like in the millions, not dozens of millions, but in the millions. But something this like digitalization would work for would be you could vote direct on everything potentially, which is not necessarily what I want. All public services being available to everybody, and really emphasized of being available to people. So people who don't usually have education or people in prisons, like it would be extra advertised for those populations.
I actually got a quote from a current spokesperson who's somewhat high up in power in some way. And his quote, "Free markets by virtually leaving people up to their own devices will not be fair." And he was quoted widely nationally. So I think it's like indication there's definitely a quite progressive tax in this country. People are expected to give a large amount of their income to the state. And if you ask the population itself, it does not want to make that go down. They want to keep giving that much. So it's a deeply embedded cultural value.
Trust in government.
Trust, yeah, like it's a high, like I wrote, high trust and very progressive tax. Yep. And which makes like people's wealth economic. There's a very big amount of economic equality. Economic equality. I have to get to other parts as well, but that's one part of it. Traditionally, prisons are very separated from normal society. I think there are many kinds of crimes you can do where you don't have to become completely isolated. You can have some I have heard about some prisons where you have activities where half of the people are from the prison, half of the people are people from outside the community. So I think one thing is like the prisons would be as connected to society as makes sense. There are different kinds of prisoners, of course, but there are many prisoners where it doesn't make that much sense to have them closed off away. So that's one thing. Just make it more not that crazy what do you say, marginalizing to go to prison. Something like that.
In Peru, there's this jail, and jail there is like really rough apparently, and you don't really have your own cell, you just like all sleep on the floor, and so there's a lot of internal tensions too. But then some families live there as well. So the dad will be sent to prison, and then his wife and the children, they actually live there, and during the daytime they can leave, and whatever she goes to her job, maybe the children go to school, the children also play with the other children in jail, and then in the evening they all sleep in the jail. This is not a good example, but I think it's an interesting example of how we can mix society and jail.
But it's basically, we accept this truth, please forgive me, I'm an American, but we accept this truth that life, that like water, we must flow through life, taking with that which we can, and dropping that which we can no longer hold. As such, we must accept it as our fate to be inconstant, changing from gas to liquid to solid, so long as we are still corporal, meaning alive. So that's basically the very religious thing that's behind all of this. Also, don't kill people. It's bad. Life, water is sacred. And basically this is because I have a desert country, so water is life. Which means that the most important... Oh, that means that like this is anyone can change jobs, positions, whatever, whenever they want. Social classes, whatever, each class is different depending on the season or the time. So people will occasionally, or there's a large group of people who want to be important and political and who will just keep switching jobs throughout the year so that they can remain important to voice things, but then also they're not the most important because they're jack of all trades instead of masters. So all of these have apprenticeship programs to get into them. So if you are interested, you have to, you know, take a test. They see, okay, that's how you are, and then you follow a master, become a journeyman, and then, you know, ta-da-da, you can be one of them. And then you can switch whenever you want, or you can go back to your former job because, you know, we shouldn't be caught in this idea that I studied, you know, thermodynamics in college, and therefore I must be a physicist in thermodynamics and energy for the rest of my life, even if it makes me unhappy at some point, because while I was in my 20s, oh my god, this was so cool, but right now, I'm like 48, and I just really, really, really want to start dancing again.
I don't know if I want happiness as a value of my nation, though.
I don't.
Yeah, same.
Like, I don't think people should actively be unhappy either. I want people to have purpose, not necessarily happiness. Like, to me, happiness is transitory. I'm happy when I go out drinking. I'm not necessarily happy, like I'm not satisfied by that, you know? That's not life purpose.
Like, I think for our, just to, like, make sure everybody's informed, I think this, whatever country we're talking about, we should really separate immigrants, and also refugees, and like whoever can come, that's great, right? Like, but I think that's still specifically geared towards immigrants, whereas refugees, for example, they may not be able to fit into this system at all, but this is a better alternative and they want to stay here, right? So should we change the social structure a little bit to accommodate them, or like what would we do for them? Like, just in terms of really practical policies, what I know is that if we go open border, we'd have to be a really, really rich country. So we can't be a country without like significant capital. We need the money to set up social systems to accommodate their need, and we need a strong, like, I guess not strong enough, but everybody needs to have an idea of what this means, like what refugees, what a massive amount of foreigners coming in mean, because it means social change. It means not only value change, but also structure change. So, I mean, I used to be a strong proponent for open borders, but I don't think I am now, just because I don't think any country is prepared for that yet. Germany has seen the good and the bad so far. What I know is that in rural communities, like the percentage of refugees to locals is 10-1, so integration is incredibly hard, and 91% of the refugees that went to Germany since 2015, 91% of them are on state of welfare, and after 2 years they still don't really have a job. Open border is all rosy, it's all romantic, but without a system, without a system set up to accommodate their needs and to like really get the system up and going, then it's not going to help anybody.
No country could ever be ready, right? Even if they have a system in place, but you don't know what's going to happen next. So then is it better, what is your proposal? Because there are systems, but systems like are based on the past and they don't know what's coming. So how?
There's a reason that I mentioned that whatever the country's immigration policy is going to be, like the country leaders and the people needed to know sufficiently that there is a difference between immigrants, emigrants, and refugees, right? So at least the system is set up to be able to accommodate all three of them, right? That's what I want, like, as baselines, and whatever that's coming. So like we wanted it to be highly adaptable, which means the people who work on immigration, for example, there should be enough people to, and people with versatile skills to almost immediately like change their position or like change the type of work they do based on the situation.
I think there are many cases of history where huge refugee populations have been integrated
Yes.
into societies, where the response from the people who've traditionally been in a nation haven't been
Positive.
well. It hasn't been as negative as it is today.
Oh,
I think it's also like
Yes.
I think a big part of the pressure in Germany is like because the native population is reacting very strongly to it, and they like make like the political landscape change a lot. So I think it's like also about like what kind of pressure does the refugee flows, migration flows put on populations of a small country who feel like, oh, we're losing our culture, we're losing everything. Which is I think it's difficult to quantify, like but I guess I think I thought a bit about it with my country. I think this is one of the points where it's probably not that different from many countries that are today. Like they take refugees, they don't take all of them.
Yeah.
It has a limit to its capacity, but I think yes, it takes a decent amount. I don't know what decent is, but it's definitely not like a completely closed system.
One way, because I did my research on this, is to combine immigration policy with urban policy, because the research is that statistically, people like immigrants and refugees who landed, who arrived in urban area, they in the end integrated better because first of all there was enough resources around, and secondly they aren't faced with like just the people from their own country. So what the immigration policy can also stipulate is that they would mainly go to urban areas, and if they end up in remote towns, let's say, they are not going to be forced out, but I think just because we don't make resources available in rural areas, they will still go to like the town center, let's say. Then that solves kind of the immigration problem.
I'd keep them out. I'd make them go around it. And I like Jonathan's structure of decentralization. Because then the mountain, it makes sense that people have to you build around the mountain. Maybe it takes 3-4 days to get to where you want to go, but your community is already self-sufficient.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I think that's at the heart of like the bigger footprint. You're gonna have like there will be, and because there's so much transportation out of the city, you need a road that goes under the mountain. Like you have reasons to, like it makes sense for you to destroy like make it like That's basically what you say like with.
I would hope like people localize, but that's like how people used to have communities everywhere and in some places still, but they, for some reason or another, are all moving towards urbanization because it's more efficient and because like it's, and there's bad parts to it, and maybe there's now like a pressure to do so, but I don't know, it seems like our ideal is not what naturally occurs, and so what do you mean naturally occurs? Are you saying
right
that
now.
Humans have been like in this type of urbanization since 1800s, right? Kind of since the industrial revolution.
Yeah.
But even before then, like first living, I don't know, in groups of whatever 20 people, and then like settling down and maybe growing to like 150, and then a village, like, so it's natural, it seems, for humans that until now their societies are growing. So like, for me in this conversation, I don't know how to argue if it has to be real, like
whether or not it's a human
people are
innate
not,
nature.
people are not gonna be like, oh, it's gonna take me 3 days, like.
No, I think okay. So I mean, like the birth of a society has been way longer, has existed. I mean, it happened way longer than industrialization, and I think like it when there's like a kind of a stable societal structure, especially for the sedentary people, like non-nomads, then people realize how like the concept of convenience, right? And I think this question is very much related to that. What do you do with nature when it's not conveniencing you, right? And it's definitely a really anthropocentric view to be like, oh yeah, everything has to be to my convenience. But now we can just debate it, like we can discuss like what are we gonna do, because like with more people, then there's gonna be conflict with the environment.
Humans are inherently nature too.
Yeah.
And so we cannot destroy nature without destroying ourselves, and even though we are destroying a mountain, other forces would as well. And yes, carbon footprints, yes, earth warming, and yes, this is very dangerous, white, right-wing, and conservative American politics, whatever, economics before all else. But there is a little bit, it's hard to deny that there has not been destruction throughout ecological history, and it's hard to also deny that we as humans are not prone to destroying things when there's evidence way back whenever we were first leaving Africa and going throughout the rest of the world that we did not destroy large swaths of megafauna because we could, because we needed to eat, because we didn't have limits or constraints. And so I am an environmentalist. I think everything should be, nature, which is why I think it's entirely nature-based and I hate cities. But like at the same time, this has been a pattern we've been a part of throughout time, and yes, industrialization introduced convenience and all of these things. But what if we cannot, even if we create a government, even if we have all these laws, rules, whatever's in place, ultimately some group of humans decide to organize and create their own thing and take it into their own hands. And what do we do to stop them? What if we just don't? And allow the mountain to be torn down and whatever, because we're basically using items from this earth to change the earth to suit our habitat.
I think so far, I mean, we can again define our own educational system, define what education means and the purpose of it. What do we see now? Education is primarily as to create a pretty homogenized mass culture. And that's tied to the idea of nationalism, right? Like patriotic education is pretty much everywhere, even if it's not implicitly in how history is written, in how policies are discussed in textbooks. Like you could still see the national ideals in it. But then we don't have to have that, right? We can define education as our own.
And say, what if we taught the idea of, instead of teaching ideas or content, which is where a lot of nationalism comes in, is because we can hide content or show content. What if we had a society that had free information? We have like record keepers, if you will, or like libraries with all sources of knowledge and whatever. And then in schools, we're taught how to think as opposed to what to think. And the idea behind this is, you're not forced to learn nationalistic, what did this, what did that, but you have the ability to because you have a place to go and get it. Instead, you're taught, how to create a statistical diagram, or how to, write a thesis statement in different areas, and so on and so forth. And also, I'm gonna add one more thing. It starts from a very young age.
It starts very young.
It would start very young as opposed to now, when we probably need content to get careers, but we're being taught how to think as opposed to what they think. But if people are taught how to think when they're younger, they'll be able to. It's like learning languages. You can apply it later and older, and it changes the way your brain develops.
Yeah. Why I said it's not mandatory is because I would want people to learn when they see the need to. And so I want the education system also not to be closed, like once you are over 18, right? You could like take a course or something, but school not really, or a lot changes.
Well, no, but mandatory education usually is a K-12, so that means up until high school. I mean,
yeah, so I'm not done. So what I would like is that that's not the case. I want people to be able to be able to learn when they want to. So if you like didn't go to school until you're 20, yeah, you probably like are disadvantaged to other people, but then I think it's much more useful when you start learning when you think that you should. So if then you see this other person who did something that you would like to learn, then I want you to do that. If you never see the point, then maybe you just shouldn't be doing that.
I think a lot of arguments for mandatory education relates to equality and social mobility.
Yeah.
And yet there are many things about mandatory education that I really don't like. So I think I would want my country to be actively investigating like how different kinds of educational systems influence things like social mobility. Can you make a system where you don't have to mandate every single thing that a child has to learn for 12, 15 years of their lives? Can you loosen some of the direct like curriculum in ways that still retain some of the like really, really important social functions, societal functions that education played, mandatory education traditionally has played?
I think it is important that people should read and people should have the ability to learn. And I think like maybe, it's based off your skill if you can pass a proficiency test of being able to read and do basic mathematics. I also think math is important, but that's just a little bit of science. Then you don't have to go to school and you don't have to continue going to school until whatever you like. And you can drop out and then go live your life and do what you want to do.
Yeah, I'm thinking about another compromise that like there are some resources available and you can use them whenever you want, but just like every citizen, we can define maybe some courses or some workshops so that this state would be like these are totally free and you should take them at some point in your life. And yeah, that's like apart from literacy, just the let's say literacy in literature, finance, and math. But then the rest of them are like what Marho said. You don't have to do them at the age of 12. You don't have to do calculus at age 14. You can do them when you need.
Yeah, I think those are reasonable space for compromise.
But when they have to take a decision, they didn't talk about age, but they all have to agree. And it's not about voting. They don't vote. You just talk until you find the way.
But I think maybe like it's just because he hasn't been given the space. Would people expect that of him? So like I don't know if 8-year-olds can do that or not, because in my country, no one allows them to make those kind of decisions.
Why it has to be so connected to age?
Usually, like it's like you said, why age is so important. Like, there are multiple research that show your brain activities and also brain structures, and in general, human brain matures after, like at the end of adolescence. So, why 18? That's a good question because 18 is pretty arbitrary. I do like the idea of giving children a voice, not really about giving everybody the decision-making power, but sometimes the children ask the better questions, especially with regards to nature and society and like human beings.
Any group or society can maximum be 150 people.
A cohort.
Exactly. Yeah. Then, like, it really changes what kind of decisions you have to make, I think, and also changes like the agency that everyone has, which maybe it's really dangerous to say to a child like, you have a voice in this too. And on the other side, I think I would hope that like people would be, whatever it means, very responsible, because what they do, like, they will see a direct impact because there's so little people.
Yeah.
I'm like going, how can you create like a decentralized society, because you like give that power to smaller communities?
Yeah.
Because I really think that's like the core of what can make human life good. Like this is the kind of life humans function well in, I think.
So is your country only 150 people big?
Oh, I didn't think about countries. It's just like, countries don't really matter as they have like children and some other people die. I don't know if they would balance out to always be between 100 and 150, but I can imagine like some fluidity amongst them, right? Or maybe like you meet someone from a different community, you can start a new community, so it's more flexible. But it's so hard to imagine what it would be like in real life.